Good morning. You are at the Rainwater and Context Speed presentations, and I'll tell you about the AICP and AIA credits are 1 1/4 for each of them, and you need to sign in at the back of the room for the AIA, and for AICP you report attendance online at planning.org/CM. So we've got 9 presenters this morning, and then and this session is to go until noon, and then we have our Rainwater in Context strategy session at 12:30, and we're told that they're probably serving sandwiches out in the lobby, which would be good if that works out. And our first presentation will be by Lisa Nisenson.
All right, good morning, everyone. I hope you liked our little poster that we made up. I'm going to get started here and tee things off. And basically what we're going to look at in this little presentation is where are we on the innovation curve, because we are innovators. I'm borrowing from the work of C. Everett Rogers. Everybody should read that book, The Adoption of Innovation. It applies to what we do. He created the term early adopter. Who are our early adopters? Well, we had a bunch of early adopters because they had to. People with CSOs and consent decrees. So they're adopting our stuff like crazy, these bigger cities. We also have early adopters because they had to under strict stormwater permits. So Southern California, they can only drain 5% of their stormwater untreated back into the curb and gutter. Another early adopters are the Pacific Northwest and Bluffton, peoples whose economic development and identity are closely bound and pressured by stormwater. So once we subtract out our early adopters, who do we have left? Well, we are at something called the chasm. We have got to cross the chasm. So how do we do that? Well, solar industry has already looked at this chasm, and they found out that after you subtract out the early adopters, their early majority is just like ours. They're more skeptical. They're more driven by upfront costs. So this life cycle analysis, forget it. Driven by reliability, but they're more open to advice from peers rather than experts. So what does that tell us about our early majority? Well, we need to find out that definition. We need to figure out what peer pressure is for this group of people, and we need to figure out how sensitive they are to cost. So when we poke them in that soft underbelly that's going to get them to go our way, where are those pressure points? If we start defining who our early majority is, let's look at small cities and counties, people who are MS4s, but not necessarily big cities with CSOs and the bigger problems and the better grids and things like that. Well, they don't have a lawsuit to point to. They don't have consent decrees pressuring them. They may have Tea Party issues, and they're taking on sustainability, but they're also struggling with how you handle the communications of hidden benefits and avoided costs, but we all know that. And they also have a habit of dumping their stormwater into the rivers for free. So this whole we're going to save you money thing, you know, what's less than zero, really? So we need to figure out new ways to present budgets, not just current year, but throughout the life of the project, because upfront costs are sort of our bugaboo. We need to find their peer cities and counties, and we need to figure out ways in our own communities to link runoff to our identity, because identity is a big deal. For building owners, that's also our next early majority. Again, the cost thing is a little bit sketchy, especially if they're used to dumping their stormwater into curb and gutter for free, but they do have peers and they do have landscape budgets. So that's really their soft underbelly that we can poke at. So crossing the chasm, I remember when I left EPA, my former boss, Jeff Anderson, he wrote something and he took on our technical documents in a way that's like complimentary, but kind of like, can't you get past that? And so we need to get into the political realm of crossing that chasm. Our first one are those stormwater engineers who will not sign on to our stuff because they're afraid of losing their license. I encounter this all the time. You know, they talk the LID talk, but when it comes to putting their seal, their stamp, they just can't do it because if it fails, they fear they'll lose their license. So we need to redefine what it takes for them to lose their license. And it's, you approve this shit, you should get your license taken away. The other thing that's really important since I moved to the suburbs is we talk a lot about champions. Mayors are champions. Once we go to our early majority, we are dealing with county boards and small city boards. They have 5 people. We have got to learn the politics of the 3-2 vote. We've got to stop relying on one champion. So, word to the wise. HOAs matter. We smart growth people don't like HOAs because they're kind of sprawly, but they matter, and they are hotbeds of innovation in Sarasota where I am. They're totally into peer pressure. They have huge maintenance budgets, and they're great for collecting data. But even though we talk a good game about politics, we still need the numbers, so we do need things like banking on green. ASLA has a great case study bank, and we do need organized information. In case you thought you were missing tactical urbanism, I'm going to cover that here. This sort of thing begins to change the tone in the community. So stormwater is cool, and green stormwater is great. So these little tags, guerrilla gardening, like pothole gardening, putting flowers in your stormwater grate so people all of a sudden pay attention to it. This is cheap promo for my other one. Talk to me afterwards if you want to, because I'm going to tee up Lynn, who is really going to talk about the policy framework for this next group of people that we need to come our way. That's it.
Thank you.
Paul has said that if we do our talks in under 7 minutes, he'll buy us a beer. So I'm while I'm fussing with this, because we have to change computers, there were technical issues on this. I'm Lynn Richards. I'm the policy director at EPA's Office of Sustainable Communities. I am not in the Office of Water. I am not in the Office of Water, but I work quite a bit on the National Stormwater Rule, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Look, I have sweaty palms. Okay, so as many of you know, EPA publicly said that we were going to propose a stormwater rule in September of 2011. The rationale behind it was simple. What we were seeing across the country is that the more that communities developed, the more runoff we had, and the more the increased pollution we had. And with the increased pollution, it actually cost quite a bit for communities to begin to address it. So as part of a settlement agreement with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, the EPA said that we would consider, very close, pay attention to my words, the EPA said that we would consider a national stormwater regulation for new development and for redevelopment, right? And as part of this measure, it was looking at managing stormwater on site through green infrastructure approaches. And what I find, what this rule is considering to propose is, one, getting the land use right. Let's start there. There are I think 50,000 abandoned lots. That was something that Ellen Durham Jones said recently. If you put development on existing development, that is your #1 water quality strategy. You're a mayor, you want to experience the benefits and opportunities associated with growth, right? But you are facing stormwater problems, direct your development to already degraded areas, right? There are a lot of opportunities. As I already said, Ellen Durham Jones said there were about 50,000 of these abandoned strip malls and single-family malls. There are these freestanding malls. The GAO, the Government Accounting Office, estimates that there are almost 500,000 brownfield sites. This is prime property that already is served by existing infrastructure. If you come away with nothing else, the best water quality strategy that you can do is direct development to your already degraded places. Atlantic Station is a great example of this. It's a 138-acre brownfield site in central downtown Atlanta. It's about a 12-minute walk from the transit line. I won't go into the amount of retail and residences placed on this site, but when we compared it to a suburban context, we found that the Atlantic Station reduced the amount of stormwater generated by 75%. This is before you talk about any management strategies that the rest of the panel is really going to dive into, that the process of development and how they were putting it on the site compared to a suburban alternative reduced the amount of stormwater generated by 75%. So you're a developer, you're worried about your bottom line, that 75% less stormwater management that you need to put in just with where and how you developed. So part of it, as we discussed, is directing the development to an already degraded area. The second part of it is how you're developing the site. Compact mixed-use development further reduces your water quality impact, and it makes perfect sense. If you're consuming less land because you're creating a more compact development, again, generating less stormwater. If you do your mixed of uses and you begin to weave in transit, you're reducing how much you're driving because you're increasing walking. Reducing how much you're driving, pay attention here, technical term coming up, you're reducing the amount of gunk that cars leave on the road. Less gunk on the road means less gunk being washed off into the streams, right? Less gunk on the road, less cars driving means less air emissions that are falling into our water bodies. 1/3 of the nitrogen found in the Chesapeake Bay, 1/3 of the nitrogen in the Chesapeake Bay is from mobile sources. In other words, we will never be able to get to the levels that we're trying to in the Chesapeake Bay unless we start driving less. How do we start driving less? We start building communities that are walkable, mixed use, and are on already degraded sites. So all of these issues are being considered for the National Stormwater Rule. Number one, get your land use right. Here's an example in Shalishan, Washington, very much like Atlantic Station, increase the densities, increase the mix of uses, and decrease runoff by 50%. Once you get the land use right, green the heck out of it. And that's what these guys are really talking about. And the beautiful thing about the work that a lot of new urbanists and water engineers like Paul have been doing is figuring out how we begin to integrate stormwater management into our more urban environments. And there are a lot of examples. This is a project that I did in Covington, Kentucky, northern Kentucky, right on the other side of Cincinnati. They were facing a consent decree. So Covington came to us and say, how can we sustainably grow? How can we grow our economies when we have to dramatically reduce our runoff? And what we first said is get the land use right and then green the heck out of it. Just another example of the types of tools that you can begin to integrate into your development. Again, the rule is going to propose that some percentage of your stormwater will need to be managed on site. And so we'll really be able to draw from the wide range of work that has already been done. But as I said, the rule was supposed to be proposed in September of 2011. If you look at the website now, we're in May 2012, it said, look here shortly for a new date of when the rule will be proposed. So step back for a minute and imagine that you're the President of the United States. You're Obama. All right, you're in the White House, and the housing industry is in the toilet. You need to worry about the economics of this country. And last year, your Environmental Protection Agency had just put out a construction and development rule. So anything, any additional regulation that will cost the development industry something is going to make headlines and is going to hit the economy. Just look at it from Obama's perspective. So from our perspective, the EPA, what that means is that our cost-benefit analysis has to be even tighter. And that's what's taking the time. That's the rulemaking process. But what can we do in the meantime? Let's go directly to what Lisa was saying. One, I think, well, let me back up. So once the rule is proposed, it's probably going to be another year, 18 months while we take in comments, and then probably another several years before it's finally implemented. So from this point on, figure 4 or 5, 1 minute left, figure 4 or 5 years before we get implementation. So what can we do in the meantime? We can change state standards. Virginia and Tennessee have both modified their state standards to adopt the very type of permit that we're considering at the federal level. And in fact, they'll be exempt from the federal rules because everything that they've proposed is already stricter than the federal standards. We can plan where and how we want to grow. This becomes really important when we know where we want to grow. for aligning our infrastructure investments. Infrastructure investments are just not water and roads, it's everything, right? It's our drinking water, it's our sewers, it's also our civic infrastructure, it's our schools. What we are finding across the country is that communities will make investments in neighborhood A for water and in neighborhood B for transportation, and then 5 years later, like, well, that's not working, and we have to flip-flop it. Or we'll be replacing a sewer and a road 1 year after that road was just repaved and upgraded. Now I've got to wrap up. When we begin to align our infrastructure investments, we figure out a way to begin to integrate our infrastructure. And a great way to start integrating our infrastructure is how can we use our transportation street network to start managing our stormwater. You can also, the city of Emeryville, they didn't change their codes, but they did establish guidelines on what new development needed to look like. We could also begin to change our codes. Again, code for parking maximums, code for narrower streets, code for mixed use, code for redevelopment. These are all have dramatic water quality outcomes. And then finally, get the land use right, green the heck out of it. We need to add texture. Stormwater management is something that can actually be beautiful and add texture and distinction to our communities. And when we begin to do that, when you can see it on the street level, you begin to value it. When residents value it, the local governments will invest in it. When local governments begin to invest in it, you begin to do it more. Which kind of goes back to my my opening statement: is if we begin to do this and people begin to invest in it, do we really need a stormwater rule? Done. Thank you. So I was the first person to go over.
I think you owe Lisa the beer now.
I do. And it's Steve Coyle that is next.
Okay, so my name is Steve Coyle. I'm an architect. I'm not an expert in stormwater, but as an architect and urbanist, I need to know enough about this so I can have a positive impact. So I'm going to briefly go talk about a EPA greening grant project that's in the Southwest, but specifically it's in Phoenix, and the whole Southwest, as you know, is trending to reduce water. They'll have less water to work with in the next 50 years. This is the area here, Lower Grand Ave in Phoenix. It's a couple of miles of arterial, and we, as part of the greening grant, we did a 3.5-day charrette that I led, and you can see the evolution of the design of the streetscape, and here's what it looks like, the context. It's one of the older routes that crosses I-10 to the northwest, and then it joins Van Buren and 7th Ave in Phoenix, for those of you who know the area. So it's basically it's a relatively, our section is a short stretch of what some people call a corridor of crap, but it's a vital link both for mobility and economically. And here's some of the rainwater information I can read off of here. So you can see some of the existing infrastructure, the massive infrastructure. Most of it is surrounding that corridor, and here it is. Here's the 100-year floodplain. You can see in the light blue to the left of that photo. Here's the impervious area, about 48 acres of impervious area. Some of it buildings, but most of it surface paving, parking, and so on. And then the pervious area is only about 500. That would be 500,000 cubic feet of annual capture. So you can see we have a sort of a deficit of pervious area and a predominance of impervious area. And the current functional context here, it starts at the southeast end. It starts at this intersection, this giant intersection, where I got slapped down when I suggested maybe they do some sort of a roundabout or something else besides this giant intersection. And that's what it looks like when you're driving up there. In terms of capacity, we're looking at probably somewhere around 35, 40,000 ADTs, mainly connecting with I-10 to the northwest. And you've seen plenty of these. These, Lynn mentioned the malls around the country. There's more arterials. There's got to be thousands of thousands of these arterials all over the whole country. And they, some of them look a little like this. This is, of course, Southwest, but they fences, parking lots. Some some impervious areas, and then it greets I-10 to the northwest, and if you're looking towards I-10, that's what it looks like. And this is what when you're heading downtown Phoenix. There's Phoenix rising like a phoenix to the southeast. So we're trying to green or to improve the streetscape, but also we're trying to handle stormwater. So the first move is to go from 5 lanes to 3. As you can see here, we took without really reducing much the capacity, the throughput capacity, because it's mainly throughput. There's not many right or left turn lanes. So the thoroughfare design goes from this to something like this, going down to 3 lanes. I also advocated a 4-lane concept because I feel that you don't really need the turn movements, and 3-laners and 4-laners can be, I think, can be good alternatives. So that's what the 4-lane looks like. Rainwater management, basically taking the runoff from the buildings and from the street. And this is just an example. We're trying to get stormwater into these capture basins, bioswales, and also get some good heat reflection. And so going from the northwest at the I-10 to the overpass to the southwest end, the southeast end, I just wanted to show you the streetscape. So here what we've done is we've added street trees, rain gardens, bioswales, and we've reduced paving significantly, especially that centerpiece, which doesn't exist now. So what we're trying to do is really reduce the amount of overall impervious surface. The typical street plan is adding street trees, adding these rain gardens, and reducing paving by removing 2 lanes. So that's this is very simple. I mean, this is not gold-plated. This is, sort of basic approach to sort of moderate cost rainwater capture. Rain garden design here. What we've done is design these, these linear capture areas with on-street parking and a bike lane. And the capture design consists of these linear rain gardens, under-drain pipe, and a bioretention soil mix. So pretty standard stuff for many of the arterials, particularly in the southwest. We also use a gravel drain layer at the base to help the infiltration. A typical street plan at the intersections look like this, where what we've done is gone from essentially a giant paved area at the intersections, and we've tried to introduce or extend those capture areas towards the intersection. And then when we get down to Van Buren, which is that giant intersection, we've done the same, tried to introduce more capture area, more greenery, and at least try to provide some decent presence. I'm an architect. I'd like to do it with buildings, but the buildings are not going to happen yet, and it's this incremental growth. So we've seen that private investment follows capital investment. So hopefully, by greening the street, we improve the capital investment, extending the sidewalks, and some lessons learned from this. It's in that little cartoon says it's not what you think. The idea is collect rain before it reaches the car park. Anyway, so we're trying to do some very simple, pragmatic solutions using time-tested rainwater strategies and techniques, employing reliable, durable replacement materials, stuff that if it gets damaged can be replaced easily, and simply making the designs adaptable for future modifications. So if you have some changing of some intensification of uses, removal of curb cuts, you can make those rather easily, and make designs that address more than one issue. Just those rain gardens, they reduce heat island effect, they capture rainwater, and they're nice to look at. And just a plug for my book, which Paul Crabtree was a contributor on. We have a chapter on water and rainwater in there, so that's available at the bookstore. And I'm going to cue up John Ford, and John's going to talk about the life and death and then funeral of LID. John? And John, I'm looking for your presentation. Yeah, I'm not a PC person, so. Okay.
Are you
So it's down here.
Microsoft
just do it.
bad PowerPoint slide.
Goodbye, LID.
That's the one.
Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.
So I'm doing something a little different, my presentation. I'm Jonathan Ford, civil engineer with my own firm, Morris Beacon Design, Providence, Rhode Island. Ladies and gentlemen, we're gathered here today to pay our last respects to low-impact development, or LID to friends. LID lived a short but prolific life, carving a literal imprint across this country. To begin, a few highlights from the life of LID. LID we see manifested in the bioswales and bioretention, the rain gardens and rain barrels, the perforated pipe and the pervious pavement, the green roofs and the green ways. Perhaps more important, over time you infiltrated the regulatory system, creating a legacy in the stormwater manuals and design guidelines now being enforced, where LID is the core guiding principle for developers and designers to tread lightly on the land. Shown here is a greatest hits list from state stormwater manuals in New England. LID, we were so proud. But the time has come for the next generation to evolve and grow from your foundation. It's not entirely your fault. In recent years, you associated yourself far too much with some unsavory characters like sprawl. Shown here, a layer of LID technology over the same old land use patterns, straight from the New Hampshire State Stormwater Manual. And LID really hit it off with conservation subdivisions. You gave us transcendent solutions such as going from 2 cul-de-sacs to 1. Here from Rhode Island's brand new 2010 State Stormwater Manual as a solution for laying light on the land. We're facing a new world these days, where smaller scale infill and redevelopment within our existing walkable places offers both a market-driven and environmentally sensitive solution, and one where the banks are returning the developers' phone calls. LID, this hasn't been your strong suit, but you never were really given a chance. Similarly, your principles haven't evolved or maybe haven't been properly expressed to embrace the case for density and development patterns as the ultimate stormwater BMP. God forbid we mention Manhattan and watershed health in the same sentence, but we know the proven benefits of density for watershed health. LID, you were misunderstood. You never had the chance to grow up. Rather than focusing on the typically expressed site-by-site LID tenet of reduction of impervious area, we need to move towards understanding that not all impervious area is created equal. We know on a per capita basis that increased density leads to decreased watershed impact. We know the watershed and infrastructure cost benefits of more development intensity utilizing less impervious area. These are numbers many in this room are familiar with and many have helped to generate. But as we know, the big picture approach is easier said than done and requires a watershed level analysis to define and reinforce growth centers while also requiring the accompanying natural preservation. Again, LID, not your strong suit. When it comes to design, LID, you never really got to know the transect. You should have been best friends. But again, it's really not your fault. Your one-size-fits-all manifestation against the backdrop of suburbia was a beginning towards healing the scars of the old pipe and pit methodology, but it's not enough. It's our fault, really. The antisocial engineers, whether by training or inherent personality, never really absorbing the world around us to understand the character of the built environment, the variables that describe great, vibrant places, and how engineering should serve the character of the urbanism with a nuanced, context-appropriate response. Instead, the treatment train is driving the bus. It takes extra thought and negotiation, but we know the right contextual solution can be permitted and built very often cheaper. This is especially difficult within my New England post-industrial context, where almost every site is contaminated with no overflow to combined sewer allowed, but the retrofit opportunities are huge. Here, an abandoned lumberyard becomes a new office building that happens to be built from repurposed shipping containers. 100% impervious, forgotten site transformed, both urbanistically and environmentally, with simple and easily maintained infrastructure, keeping 100% of stormwater runoff out of the combined sewer, while celebrating nature. Bursts of green and linear natural elements serve as gateways and thresholds, networks of interconnected nodes, and conveyances framing pedestrian patterns and the public semi-private transitions, and creative use of native materials, some of which native to the industrial context, contribute to many celebrations of nature, a greener than green counterpoint. The new economy homes are smaller, centered on common community spaces, and placing critical importance on creative site design. Like the cottage court shown here, 15 cottages on 3/4 of an acre, immediately adjacent to an existing historic Main Street, filtering and infiltrating the 100-year storm on site with the BMT toolkit strategically to enhance quality of place. So what's the future? What do we as agenda setters need to do? How do we set a new framework that values our existing walkable places, already doing their part for watershed health, with walkability alone, but able to do more when properly integrated with the LID toolkit? Can we as engineers call ourselves urbanists, civic builders again, and take what we've learned from our studies of place, character, context, vitality, and understand how we can rewrite rules to support growth and great places in balance with nature? Can we use watershed analysis to make the case for and enable walkable density in our form-based codes and demonstrate how stormwater management should work to elevate vibrant, lovable, walkable places of various scales and characters? Can we redefine the examples in our manuals and our design guides, evolving the site-by-site, one-size-fits-all approach to provide appropriate cues and inspiration tied into today's development reality? An evolved framework built on the ashes of LID should incorporate density as a stormwater BMP where not all impervious area is created equal. Context above all, recognize and encourage incremental gains and advocate for lovable, simple, cheap, easily monitored, easily cared for infrastructure. Which brings us back to our remembrance on this mournful day, as we thank LID for establishing the building blocks of an evolved approach, where each LID goal can be addressed in a more valuable way, using codes, context, calibration, and creativity. LID, RIP.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Doan. I'm a principal at Mainstreet Architects. We're based out of Ventura. And today I would like to maybe just make a quick, couple of step back and talk about the basics of water. Whenever we talk about the subject of water, the one thing that pops up in my mind is that movie Chinatown, in which, one of the famous saying is that either you bring water to LA or you bring LA to water. And, when we talk about the subject of water, it's very easy for us to think, okay, it comes out of the tap, but we never ask the question, where it's coming from. Of course, we use water for agriculture, to grow food. We use for cooking, we use for washing, and so on and so forth. Recreation, we use for, to generate energy, electricity. And we use for a lot of the mining or extraction, fracking anyone. Of course, water is also used to manufacture everything that we see. In fact, when you look around you today, every product that you see around you has to be made with the use of water. So now, just want to give you some kind of like maybe some statistic about the situation of water. Our nation has a big thirst for water. And it's not just a matter of how do we recollect water from the rain, but also, how do we minimize our use to begin with. As an example, Mona Lake between 1941 and 1982 lost 80 31% of the surface area. So we talk about a 40-foot vertical drop. The average household water usage in our nation is about half an acre-foot of water per year. So, where does the water come from? Here's some very sobering statistic to share with you. Only 0.0014% of the world water is really available for humans' use. These are some of the graphics to help illustrate that. 97% of the water that we see is actually from the ocean. Barely 3% of water is considered to be fresh water, and out of that, you can see that the ice cap and glacier keep almost 70% of that. The groundwater is about 30%. So just a very, very small fraction of that water is truly available to us. And even from that fraction of the water, much of it is in lakes and swamps. So again, the usable water is extremely minimal. This is another graph to show you how much water is available for our use. And yet, even with that, about 1.1 billion people do not have access to water, to clean water. And there's no new water. There's none available to create. It's like, and yet population keeps growing, mostly in poor country. So there's a linkage with the climate change. The weather is getting drier, and the glaciers in the Himalayas is really receding at a pretty scary pace. The Himalayas is considered to be the third pole. In fact, I just love this saying from this one engineer who lives in that region. He said he has seen glaciers disappear in his life. So he doesn't need scientific data. He is the scientific data. So what are some of the possible solutions? Some of them, of course, is going to be based on new technology. And this is the project that we've completed a couple of years ago for the city of Oxnard. Essentially, it's a project where we, reclaim the water, pump the water back up, and remove the brine solution and pump it back into the ground. But even so, the building, in our design, we rely a lot on not just the advanced technology of how we ventilate and control the climate in the building, but also we use it in a very, very passive way. This is another project also for the city of Oxnard. This is kind of unique in the sense that there's also a restoration and demonstration wetland project as part of the architecture project. What it does is it takes the effluent out of the treatment center, treat it again, put it through a series of filtration, and the water that comes out would be clean enough for people to drink, even though we don't have the permit from EPA yet to allow to sell to people for drinking. But at least it can be used for irrigation and agriculture. Of course, the building includes a lot of the green approaches, green technology, including solar panels and natural ventilations. For the parking, we use permeable gravels to allow for better infiltration of rainwater. And even though that process will use quite a bit of energy, but it's still better than importing water from the delta of California. So we have some kind of a backup scientific data to prove that. And also it would have a lower carbon footprint as well. This is another project that, in fact, Paul Crabtree is also part of the team for the city of Thousand Oaks. We're designing a new hazardous waste center, and we're applying all the kind of strategies that Steve touched on earlier. But here's a question that I would like to raise, and that is that all there is to it? I think that I think there's a tendency to rely too much on technology. Technology is fine, it's great, but I think that we need to we need to be more aware of other ways of approaching that. And for those of you who deal with or who have to deal with the Clean Water Act, we know how challenging that is. Regulations can be pushed around by different self-interests. It has, as Lynn can probably attest, it takes a long time to get regulation to be implemented. So what I would advocate is a culture of planning ahead. So we, a culture of proactivity. We know that we need to understand the limitation of technology and rely more on common sense. Every issue can be very nuanced and complex, and we need to understand that we need to rely on choice and diversity. So kind of like I create for myself sort of like a 7-step plan. Kind of like the culture of planning ahead, plan to preserve natural resource, plan for better sustainability in the natural and human realms. So everything is interconnected. As you can see, it can be a virtuous or a vicious cycle as compared to a culture of monoculture. This is what we are used to see. This picture is kind of really scary for me because this is in China, and China is trying to emulate, our way of life. And the culture of monoculture is helped by this type of zoning and zoning plan and regulations. Whereas, if we rely on a good common sense, good urbanism, this is what we would have. So I'm going to leave this picture with you, this image. This is common across the nation. And I said the end, I also hope that would be the end of this type of development. Thank you.
Okay, Grant is next. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I just want to announce that CNU does post all the presentations, or all the tickets from the presenters. So
Nice.
these will be available in a couple of weeks on the CNU website.
Great. Thanks. My name's Grant Humphreys. I'm a developer from Oklahoma, and I'm going to show you kind of a real-world developer's perspective on a project called Carlton Landing, which is located in eastern Oklahoma. It's about 2 hours from Oklahoma City, 3 hours from Dallas, and I think this is going to, yeah, it's rolling. Okay. Everything I'm speaking of is conceived by a guy named Tom Lowe, who's with DPZ. He asked me just a couple days ago to speak on his behalf, and so I'm telling you my perspective of it. Our master plan was put together by DPZ in 2008. We have 1,600 acres of land. 950 of it's covered by the master plan. We began to work with Tom Lowe and Guy Perlman in May of 2009. Following the master plan charrette that Andreas did, we wanted to put together a stormwater management program to go with the architecture and the sustainability guides that we're putting together. It's important to allow all of that to contextually work together because everything is connected. And we worked for about 3 days putting that together. It gave our civil engineers and landscape architects a chance to be involved. Quick overview on the approach that we took putting together the light imprint. Phase 1 area here shows about 150 acres, and most of it's 3 to 5 degree slopes. So it's good for stormwater drainage. We reviewed the topo maps and physically walked the land and identified existing drainage patterns. Orange lines are the ridges, blue lines are the troughs, blue arrows are the natural flow of the water, and typically there's no site grading in the way that we're developing the land because we're using pier and beam construction, stem walls, and footing system. And so these natural creeks are important to see how the water flows. From that, we put together this map that shows the catchment areas. This is 2 to 5 acre areas. This is how you'd approach it on a greenfield site. Urban infill site could be site specific, but on a larger master plan context, this is what we did. The next 4 slides show some of the tools that we used in the toolbox. And what I think is so great about the light imprint approach, and Tom's book's available at the bookstore, It provides a matrix of calibration depending on the transect so that you can look at the transect, the soil conditions, the soil slope, the amount of money you want to spend, and the level of maintenance that you're required to pick up. And it will give you tools in storage, channeling, paving, and filtration. In channeling, you know, the area that we have in Oklahoma, it's a very intensive weather pattern. We can get 3.5 inches of rain in a 30-minute storm event. And so you're looking at something that our civil engineers initially were pushing back on, saying, you know, Tom's a nice guy, he's from North Carolina, they get these nice kind of soaking rains out on the East Coast. What we have here in Oklahoma is a very intense flood event, and I don't know if this can really help. And what we ended up doing over the course of time is proving them wrong and showing that the light imprint approach works for areas of more temperate climates, but it also works for areas that are more intense. We've also found that the light imprint is easy to adjust. With a pipe and gutter system, everything's encased in concrete, it's underground. Therefore, it causes people to over-engineer. If you need an 8-inch, you put in a 12-inch. What we found is since everything's on the surface, it's a guy with a shovel, and you can calibrate it. You can stand back, wait till the next storm event, and see what's going to happen. This is a private lot, and what we did is we looked at the pre-construction stormwater runoff requirement and then how it was going to be affected post-construction. And so we share the load between the private realm and the public realm and actually have a stormwater light imprint mitigation requirement as part of our design review. And it varies from T3, where about 100% of the mitigation can be absolved on the site, to a T5 area where we're at about 20%. We transfer the load, as you can see here, into the public realm. And we'll have, I'll look at this boulevard here in a minute, but some of the stormwater conveyance in the median there, it's all on the surface, it's aesthetically pleasing. People like to look at it. And it's a place where, in a storm event, instead of everything just going underground into the largest detention pond, it becomes a thing where the kids can play in the water. You can see how the system's performing, how it's functioning. Here's a cross section. You see that all of our planting areas are concave, so they have a stormwater freeboard capacity. We use pervious paving. We use rainwater conveyance systems. This is the rendering of that same boulevard, and this is done by Chris Ritter. But in the planning stages, you know, we took an artistic approach on our medians, and we wanted to celebrate the rainwater, so that as the rain falls, as these tools that we've put in place begin to work, you can see it working. It's aesthetically pleasing. Here's a picture of it in the built form, so you see the rocks that we actually found on site and put them in place. On our boardwalks, which is a pedestrian-only street, we've got stone trickle channels and xeriscape native tall grasses. And we actually have more cells on the boardwalk street than any other street because of the light imprint landscaping that we've done there. It's attractive, it's pleasing to people. Here's the south end of that same street, and you can see a stone trickle channel on the right side of the screen, which brings the water down. The water actually goes into a swell around our park, which actually provides safety for pedestrians. When kids are playing in the park, they are more protected from vehicular traffic around the park because of the swells. There's the stone trickle channel bringing it down. Like I say, in a dry season, it's aesthetically pleasing in the event of a storm. If we need to, we can add weirs in between those stone outcroppings there if we need to increase our storage capacity. It's something that you can modify incrementally, manually, cheaply over time, depending on the actual conditions. So, passing the real-world test, we believe it's common sense. It's not just left to the professionals. It performs well, and it's cost-effective. We brought the Corps of Engineers out, and they wanted to bring their friends and show off, you know, how we're approaching this in a very sustainable manner. It's aesthetically beautiful. Those girls were doing the Easter egg hunt in our stormwater ditch. How often do you find people that are doing public events and civic events, memorable family events with their little white shoes and their Easter dresses in a stormwater collection system? But you can do that with light imprints. So I'd encourage you guys to buy the book. That's it.
Thank you.
This is our first year of operations. The master plan was in 2008. Home construction started about 15 months ago. And so we've got 12 homes completed, a few more customers going up now, 16 homes this summer. And so it's a 1,600 acres of land. It's a 30-year build-out, 2,700 homes. It's in that first year of operations.
Okay, you've got sales already done?
Yeah, no, we had
Pre-sales?
7 sales, 8 sales in the last 3 weeks.
My name's Paul Crabtree, and I'm a recovering civil engineer. I'm going to talk about a sort of a deceptively simple rainwater and water recycling system at the community scale that we're calling the Oasis Smart Water Infrastructure System. The project that we were able to develop this on is in Saudi Arabia. It's an addition to the city of Mecca, about a 50,000 population addition. It's in the desert on a really flat site. And this is the conventional water supply system where the water in this case comes from a desalination plant about 70 kilometers from the site. So it's very expensive water. And then this is a conventional sewage collection and treatment system where the sewage runs in the pipes to the treatment plant and then is just discharged. So what the first thing in this proposal is that treatment plant is located near the site, and then the water, once it's treated, goes back to the project and is used for toilet flushing and for irrigation. And that's in a dual pipe system. So first of all, the potable uses are for drinking, cooking, showering, and sinks. And that'd be in one set of pipes through the community and to the building. And then once those are used, they go back to the treatment plant and the water gets treated. Then for the non-potable water, that gets recycled actually a couple of times because once it's, here we go. This cycle actually happens a couple of times with the same water because it gets used, goes to the treatment plant, goes back through the toilets and laundry and runs through there. And that cycle in itself, the dual pipe system, results in a 55% reduction in use of the desalination water. So the next part of the system, and this is where we've joined community rainwater harvesting with a dual water system. And this is what you could call a rainwater harvesting street. It's basically a V section. So all of the rain, and this is a typical section, but of course there are several V sections for the entire community. They vary in width depending on the context or the T-zone, but all of them collect water both from the buildings and the lots and from the streets, and it goes to the center. And this is actually a French drain. So it gets collected in a bioswale here. It could then overflow into this bioswale and then infiltrate into this French drain. This is another view of it. So this, and the utilities are highlighted a little more, the dry utilities on each side. This is the dual dual pipe, one potable and one for the reuse. This is the French drain, and this is the wastewater sewer line. There are no stormwater sewer pipes in the system. So there again, the dual water services, both in the same trench, and that provides a cost saving. There's the dry utilities, the wastewater, and the French drain. And the reason, there's a couple of reasons that the French drain is located there, because in the construction sequence, the first thing, you start at the bottom and you build the deepest part, which is the sewage, the sewer main. Then you've got an open trench, and rather than just filling it with compacted engineered fill, you fill it with, you make a French drain out of it. So you've basically got a free trench already, and you're just filling it with a different kind of material, and now you've got a French drain, which is actually an ancient rainwater management practice. So the other interesting part of this is that that French drain follows the follows the sewer mains and actually goes to the treatment plant. So you have an added benefit that what does end up, a lot of it will infiltrate and recharge the groundwater, but what doesn't goes to the treatment plant and then goes back into the reuse system. This is a hydrograph showing, this is actually the pre-development hydrograph. This is the peak runoff pre-development without nothing on the site, just a sand desert. And this is the post-development. By using this system, we've actually reduced the runoff by 75% over the pre-development condition. And in this area, it's really important. The groundwater recharge is important because of the Islam Zamzam well in Mecca is an important religious site, actually, and they need to make sure that that continues to produce. And this shows the hydraulic capacity of the streets versus a concrete channel. So in this system, this is not required. The streets themselves carry the 100-year event. And then this is the cost comparison. This would be the cost of conventional storm sewer pipes and inlets. And sorry, this is in metric and Saudi rials, but the comparison there is for it's for 5,000 meters of street. The rainwater part of it would be 6.7 million Saudi rials. And with this system, it's 1.1 million. So a tremendous reduction in cost while being able to accomplish rainwater harvesting. Thank you. And Brian is next up.
John, can we blow out the candle now? No, leave it going on. All right, hey everybody, I'm Brian Teague with Community by Design. Last year, the city of Fayetteville was awarded a design grant from the Sustainable Cities Institute to simultaneously create a low-impact development manual for the city and also master plan a sustainable housing project in town. We were charged with putting together the master plan, while a local water resource engineering firm was charged with putting together the low-impact development manual. When the project kicked off, because of the low-impact development manual, there was a lot of excitement around LID, and so when we got into the master planning, we had to really give it an extra effort to implement the placemaking principles first and then come in and implement the LID later instead of the vice versa approach. The existing site at Willow Bend it presents us with numerous different natural features that help shape our master plan. It's flat site. It's nearly 100% canopy. There's nearly 100% canopy that covers the site. There's a 50-acre drainage way that traverses the site. Part of that drainage way has been relocated to one of the property lines, leaving behind an old stream bed and a small wetland. The runoff that has taken place with development over the years upstream has not treated this drainage way very well. It's not in very good shape. So again, what we wanted to do with the master planning was put placemaking principles first, and at the same time incorporate the big picture stormwater features that the site has to offer into our plan. At that point, once we've done that, then we can come in with the stormwater overlay and look at on a more microscopic level at what we can do to improve the stormwater quality running off the site. There's just some different elements of our stormwater overlay. We programmed the space between the old stream bed and the new channel with a shallow marsh, a slightly raised boardwalk, or boardwalk street, if you will, what leads you from the shallow marsh. We tried to put together a design that has an infiltration trench below that boardwalk so the water can drain to it and infiltrate into the ground. We programmed this pocket space with a fairly large rain garden. Our central green, it was primarily located because of the location of that existing drainage corridor that I was telling you about. We programmed that with a flowing park. Our bungalow court, we programmed that space with either an above ground or below ground cistern to store the water for reuse. Instead of doing the bioswales, we thought it would be more appropriate, because there was so much tree canopy on site, to use curb and gutter to really make a compact street cross-section. Permeable pavement, so gravel in the alleys and parking courts. And then we're planning to use pier and beam construction for the homes to minimize impact on the natural landscape of the site. So the LID manual is still in draft format. It's open for public comment, but the basis of the city's approach is 80% rainfall capture. And this is the volume that's equivalent to the capture and removal of a 1-inch storm event. Another way of looking at this is that the city's goal is to not allow you to have any more than 20% runoff from the site. It's a pretty simple calculation. It's based on ground cover. If your undisturbed soils, depending on soil conditions, have 4% runoff from those areas, disturbed soils 20%, and then of course impervious cover is 90%. This is a flow chart from the draft manual. Step one, design around the big picture stormwater features that are existing on the site. Calculate your runoff volume. If it's more than 20%, then begin to install structural BMPs to lower that runoff volume down below 20%. This is a list of about 10 different BMPs that the city's approved for you to use with different levels of runoff reduction volume. This is overlaying, or I guess I should say interfacing our stormwater overlay with the LID manual. Starting out pre-developed, the site's all undisturbed, so we have a 4% runoff volume leaving the site. You add the streets, it bumps it up to 23%. Add the rooftops of the homes, 42%. Add any undisturbed soil that we've disturbed during construction, and it increases it all the way to 49%. So we need to, according to the manual, we need to find a way to reduce this by 60%. So we look at a stormwater overlay and what techniques are allowable in the LID manual. We put in place the rain garden, which reduced the runoff volume down to 39%. Permeable pavement, reduced it down to 36%. An infiltration trench, 35%, and then the cistern, reduced it on down to 33%. So, we're draining 5.5 acres of our 10-acre site into BMPs that are allowed or suggested in the LID manual, reducing the runoff volume from 49% to 33% at a cost of approximately $100,000, which is 5 to 10% of the overall site improvement cost of the site. Obviously, the city's requiring 20%, so we're not quite there, obviously. So, just in closing, we were hoping that the city would provide an LID manual that was more of a transect-based approach. This project, it's really a low density project. It's 6 or 7 units per acre. So the same rules would apply to a development that's 20 or 40 units per acre. So, I haven't put together my comments to give back to the city to respond to their draft. But anyway, I was hoping with this presentation, maybe all the experts in the room could give me some feedback sometime. That's it. Thanks.
I'm sure we can talk about that at our strategy session, because that's an interesting topic for part of that. At 12:30, right here. Let's see. Kent Schwendy is next.
Well, good morning. My name is Kent Schwendy. I'm a principal with Fuss & O'Neill. The alphabet soup there after my name is kind of important to me because I'm an engineer by training, I'm an urbanist by choice, and I believe in sustainability out of necessity for the environment. So I think it's important that those three things be kind of woven together. And I think maybe one of the things that you may have been hearing as we heard some of the presentations is that to a certain extent it almost sounds like there's this inherent conflict between good urbanism and appropriate stormwater treatment. Now, there's certainly no need for that. LID doesn't kill places. It's engineers and policymakers and regulators that kill places by using the wrong type of LID or the wrong type of sustainable. So I'm going to use the term LID. I'm also going to use green infrastructure. I'm going to use sustainable. I'm going to use all sorts of terms because to me, the terms don't matter. The idea behind them, the creativity, as Richard Flora was talking about, is really the important piece in all of this. So I want to back up a second. I want to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. When I talk about sustainability, what I mean is that we shouldn't be doing something today that's endangering the ability of future generations to survive. That's really at its most basic tenet what sustainability is about. And in order to do that, there are three things that we have to balance every time. We have to balance the environment. That's the easy one. Everybody thinks sustainability and environment, they go together. Well, what about the social? That's where the urbanist fabric comes in. That's where the importance of place comes in. Because after all, it is for the people. And then ultimately, the one that's often overlooked is the economics. If it's not economically sustainable, it's not truly sustainable. If we have to keep pumping energy or money into a system, that's not sustainable, and we need to get past that. So another thing that I think is really critical for people to understand, especially I teach several classes for young engineers going into the profession, and I always stress to them that if they're in it for the ego, they've picked the wrong profession. Engineers should not be noticed. Our goal is to support the place. Our goal is to provide infrastructure that enables places, but it shouldn't impact the place. It should not make the place worse, and it shouldn't be seen. Drainage is a wonderful example because how often do you walk in or drive into a parking lot and say, what a beautiful drainage system. That really works well. But on the other hand, if you mess it up and the place is flooded, people say, gee, the engineer screwed up. So the goal of every good engineer should be to not be noticed. and just to help the place to exist. So what I want to talk a little bit about is retrofitting, because to me this is a lot more challenging, and it's a great place to show creativity, much more so than a greenfield site. Because at a greenfield site you have a lot of options, you have a lot of opportunities. On a retrofit or an infill site, you've already got a lot of things that are not carved in stone necessarily, but they might be built out of stone. And more importantly, the economic factors really start to pile up on you when you're looking at something that's already there. Buildings represent energy and money that was previously spent. It's already there. To be sustainable, we have to recognize that and try to take advantage of it. So these pictures are actually from the project that I'm going to be talking about, and these are existing conditions. And you can notice that the drainage system doesn't work very well. There are a few problems with that. A lot of times when we deal with retrofit and infill, if there's going to be infrastructure problems, the first one that we have trouble with usually is storm drainage. There are two reasons. One is that in the past we only focused on peak runoff. We didn't look at all the other things that we should have been looking at. So a lot of times the storm drainage systems that exist don't meet the criteria already. So to do anything additional is impractical without making changes. The other reason is that we tend to look at things one piece at a time. And this neighborhood that I'm going to be talking about later on is a perfect example. This is a 1940s and 50s development that at the time worked perfectly. They just put water in pipes and sent it somewhere else because that's what people did at the time. Just get rid of it, we're okay. And then more development occurred around them. And that development did the same thing, but they didn't take into account what the impacts to Shendon Valley or Shendon neighborhood were going to be. And the result was that now they have a flooding problem that they never had before. It wasn't caused by their development, it was caused by the developments around them. It's that piecemeal and quilt pattern that we use that has problems. Because I'm an engineer, I had to put in one slide that looked like an engineering slide. But we can solve these problems in a couple of ways, and one is the conventional method. And to me that's also the wrong, and I don't even think it's a solution. It's a Band-Aid, it's something we try to do. The answer is usually put in bigger pipes. The problem with that is all one big step. It has to be done at once. It causes bigger problems downstream, so all you're really doing is making your problem someone else's. And generally it costs more. So why are we fighting nature? Why aren't we trying to emulate nature? And that, when LID was started, that was what LID was about. It was about finding ways to emulate nature. It's been railroaded into all sorts of things, just like people tried to railroad smart growth into no growth, and we were able to retake that term. We need to retake the LID term. The very simple reason that all of this matters is this. As you develop a site and as you add impervious surface, you decrease the amount of infiltration that's occurring. Infiltration or runoff or evapotranspiration, that's the only way. The water's going to fall out of the sky. Same amount of water always falls out of the sky. So where does it go? It either soaks into the ground, it runs off, or evaporates back up. Those are your only three choices. So in green infrastructure, what we're really trying to do is restore a more natural hydrology. Now I think the word more is really important to me because it's not trying to recreate the natural environment. It's trying to find something that operates more naturally. You may use unnatural methods to get there. That's okay in my book. You should be trying to avoid structures, but it doesn't mean that you don't use pipes and structures in certain circumstances where you need to protect the sense of place. So there are a lot of techniques, and a lot of those you've already heard, so I'm going to skip that. But what we did was we looked at a project area that was several hundred areas, and we looked at two project pilot areas. And an engineer who shall remain nameless had already gone into that site and come up with a conventional solution. And we looked at it and said there must be other methods. And we said, what if we do things like permeable pavements? What if we do infiltration? What if we do biofiltration bump outs and retention? What if we do rain gardens? What if we do all of these things and we start to apply them? And what if we do them in such a way that they're buried, that they're hidden, that they may change the appearance of the surface only in the type of surface treatments by making the pavements look a little different, but we're not changing the character of the place because this was already a place, and it was very important that we not change it. And so as we went through the areas, we did that. We also, and this one I want to point out, we also planned ahead and said, look, right now we're talking about a retrofit, but what if we want to do additional infill? What if we want to do densification? We can plan for that. It doesn't need to be built today. It can be put in incrementally. That's the beauty of properly done low-impact design or green infrastructure. So at the end of the day, our pilot costs here came up to something in the neighborhood of $2.5 million. Of course, it wasn't the whole area, so we had to say how much would we have to expand these, how many of these pilot areas would we have to do to treat the whole area that this proposed conventional system was supposed to do. And here's what it all comes down to from a bottom line. The bottom line was that the conventional system was not going to fix the problem. It was not even including the $4 or $5 million in land acquisition, not even mentioning the fact that it was going to destroy the neighborhood in the sense of place and take up all the trees. It was going to cost $12 million. Our solution left the place intact and cost just over half that. And that is all.
Great.